My name is Drew, and if we haven't met before, welcome to ReadyBudgetGo. If this isn't your first visit, welcome back. Either way, I'm glad you're here. This is My Money Relaunch, a series where I talk about things I've learned as I dug myself out of debt for the second time and started gaining control over my finances. Before we go into today's topic, there's a couple points I need to cover. First, I'm not a financial advisor. This series is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Before making any moves with your money, do your own research and seek your own counsel. Second, while I'm talking, I'll be putting down stickers in this paint by sticker book. For each sticker I place, I will save $5 toward one of my big goals. This week's target is 50 stickers for $250 in savings. Now that my emergency fund is fully funded, for this week and the next several weeks, I will continue stockpiling money toward the big move, which is my relocation across the country this spring. This week, I want to talk about simple budgeting. And originally, I was going to call this Budgeting Doesn't Have to Be Hard. But I realized that for some people, it does need to be hard, or it needs to be complex anyway, in order for them to feel that they're in control of their money and where it's going. But being hard isn't what stopped me from budgeting initially. When I was in debt, I'd have loved to have made a formal budget, but all of the extra money I could scrounge up was going to the credit cards. And I used a fairly unconventional method of paying off my credit cards. And I've talked about this in the past where, I've used the ouch method of whichever debt was causing me the most strife, whether it was because they were the ones who were calling me the most often, or it was the usurious interest rates or a high balance, or it was almost ready to be paid off, or whatever the case may be. I prioritized the debt that way. So it was very much a subjective thing. It wasn't by the lowest balance. It wasn't by the highest interest rate. It was by whichever debt I felt was the most urgent to me for whatever reason. And I didn't budget, but I did pull back on my spending. And the way I did this is that every time I made a purchase for anything but the absolute necessities, I asked myself, would I rather have whatever I'm going to buy, or would I rather put that money toward the debt? And through that lens, I was able to put a significant amount of my income toward debt and really get things paid off in just a few years. And it was a lot of debt that I had. I'd watched cash stuffing videos quite a while ago. I mean, I think the first time I saw somebody do cash stuffing was probably 2015. It may have even been no, it wouldn't have been 2014. So it was right around 2015 or 2016. And the budgeting community then, such as it is, was not what it is. So this was just someone who was kind of sharing her biweekly budget and showing her cash stuffing, and that was it. That was all that she did. She didn't do any savings challenges. She didn't talk about her long-term goals. This was very much a paycheck to paycheck kind of budget. I mean, she would talk about, putting money into savings and wanting to use that for a wedding or a down payment or, typical things that people save up for. But it wasn't kind of the more formalized structures that we're used to seeing in the budgeting community now. And I was fascinated by it, and I didn't watch her every single week, but I watched her a few times a month, a couple times a month probably. And I wish I could remember her name or the name of her channel. I know she was in California somewhere, and it's not someone that I follow currently, so who knows what happened to her. Because I don't think I was ever subscribed. They would pop up in my feed and I would think, okay, I'll watch one this week. Anyway, so I tried that. I mean, I tried what she was doing, at least as far as using cash, and I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I don't think I even made it 1 week. And the reason is that I was trying to pay off these credit cards, and so everything was getting the minimum balance, or the minimum payment rather, except for the one that I was focused on. And I would use those other credit cards. and I would take them right back up to the limit again while I was paying off the one that I was focused on. So, in other words, all of my available cash was going to credit card payments. And for necessities, for groceries, for transportation, for things like that, I would use the available credit on the cards that were maxed. So, like, let's say, the minimum payment was, I don't know, $100, and that got me $60 of available credit because, again, the card was maxed. I would use that $60 toward essentials, meanwhile, focusing on paying off that big balance. I'd read Dave Ramsey's book, but I was turned off by it. I've talked about this in the past, just his whole process, and be honest, his persona too just doesn't jibe with me. Um, his life is not my life, right? I don't have a spouse or children or a mortgage. I don't have a couple cars. I don't have one car even. I live a very simple, uncomplicated life. And that shows up in my budget. If you've watched my budgeting videos, then you've seen that. So not only is my life not like Dave Ramsey, but it's also not like the people who call into his show, the ones where he rants and he raves. I think shouting and screaming is very much a part of his shtick, of his ethos, of his brand, and that just isn't me. Like, the more someone shouts and screams, the less I want to hear from them. And I mean, it's not just him, right? I mean, he gets his whole community involved in this. He invites people to Nashville or wherever his office is to go scream about their not having any more debt. And I just can't get on board with that. If that is something that you value or that you get value from, then by all means, more power to you. But it's just not for me. We move in totally different circles, and that's okay. So I needed to find my own way. My approach to money doesn't follow the advice of any one guru or influencer. I don't tend to watch many financial influencers or journalists because their advice is always the same, and they have a pretty narrow lane because they're trying to offer advice that applies to everyone. It's not always bad advice, but it tends to be the same from one year to the next, right? It tends to be kind of the same basic principles of retirement savings and insurance and just all of these things that they're going very narrow because they're trying to apply it to the widest swath of people. I didn't turn to budgeting immediately after I got out of debt. First, I started reading about investing, and then I enrolled in classes at UCLA, and I've talked about that in the past. As I've also mentioned before, higher learning doesn't teach people how to make a budget. There's a built-in assumption that clients, or the people that the folks that the people who are in the financial education programs at colleges are going to be working with, already know how to manage their money so they don't outspend their earnings, right? That is baked into the cake. I've only been budgeting in the real sense of the word for about a year and a half. I'm 44 now, meaning I didn't start until I was 42. I tried so many methods. I think I tried every app known to man. What put me off of apps isn't that they don't work. A lot of them are very effective, but that they aren't guaranteed. They are impermanent, as is everything in today's economy. A couple years ago, Intuit shut Mint down, and that left their users high and dry. They were pushed to Credit Karma, which is another Intuit company or product, but it didn't have all the same features, and it had a different reason for being. So I decided analog was the way to go. I didn't want to put my entire financial life into one of these apps, only to have it shut down or purchased by somebody with a real onerous privacy policy that I didn't agree with, or any of these other eventualities that could happen. Of course, you're prone to cyber attacks. Anything can happen, right? Originally, my logo for ReadyBudgetGo was going to look a lot different. The guidance that I gave to the artist that I was working with was to make the O look like a power button or an on-off switch. But then he came up with the logo I have now, with a pencil as part of the G and a sheaf of papers or cash. Either interpretation is correct. And that struck a chord, and that's how it came to be. And I liked it because it reflects my commitment to analog pen and paper budgeting. It is the most basic, but for me, it's what is effective. My first budgets were ugly. I mean, they were really ugly. I had all kinds of crazy sinking funds and about 60 different cash envelopes. I did a trial run and quickly realized it wasn't for me. Too often, I would forget to take money out before leaving the house, and when I got to wherever I was going, I'd have to use a credit card. By the time I got to the bank to deposit the cash from the envelope to pay the credit card, it would be time to take more cash out for my next cash stuffing. So I would use the ATM to deposit cash from the envelopes to pay the credit card, then walk into the branch and take out cash to stuff the envelopes. It got overwhelming and confusing real fast. So I decided to simplify. This wasn't achieved overnight, but after a few months I hit my stride, and now I have something that works for me. I can now plan an entire month in about 10 minutes. And I'm aware that as a household of one, I have far fewer stakeholders to listen to than most. But if you've seen my budgets, you can see how I have pared back and simplified over time. To paraphrase a famous quote, not everything that can be counted should be counted. That's why I don't track my cash spending. I give myself $50 in guilt-free spending cash each week to blow on whatever I want. Sometimes I spend it all. Usually there's some left. Sometimes all or nearly all remains at the end of the week. And then I put it towards something fun. What all this boils down to is, don't feel your budget has to conform to anyone else's idea of what a budget must or should look like. If you find someone else's method, yes, even Mr. Ramsay's, works well for you, then copy with pride. But don't let an unworkable method be a reason or an excuse to give up. Retool what you're doing, change what isn't working, take a deep breath, and proceed. If you hit another obstacle or resistance point later, and you probably will, do it again. Your budget has to work for only one person, and that's you. Okay, that is all for this week. Next week, I want to talk again about life disruptions, which I think is a topic that I've covered once before, specifically how they impact your finances. And I want to talk about the concept of a fortress balance sheet, which I've heard before, but I've started looking into it more, and I'm interested in how I can apply that to what I'm doing with my budget. And that sent me down a path of looking at what corporate accounting can teach us about how to manage our own money. So that is coming up next week, and I hope you'll join me. For now, if you enjoyed this episode of My Money Relaunch, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already. Until I see you in the next one, take care.